So, as far as I'm concerned, Unix is more important than Linux, or let's say GNU slash Linux, the core utilities slash Linux. Unix is more important, and I could replace Linux and the core utilities with a Unix-like system, and I would not lose a thing. Well, technically I would, but pretty much not lose a thing. Because for those of you who are initiated, let's say, or those of you who are aware of my channel, who do watch the video, all 5 of you now, you will know that really what I do mainly is the command line, the TTY, the Linux console. Yes, I know I just said Linux, but the console, let's say the terminal. And the important point is I can do all of what I want to do, which is Unix-like environment in another Unix-like operating system, such as BSD, specifically maybe OpenBSD, whatever, it doesn't matter. So what I'm going to explain today is sort of how we got to this point. What is Unix? Let's say what does that inform about the core utilities, the GNU core utilities? What does that inform about the Linux kernel? And how could I therefore just replace the entire thing with, say, OpenBSD or BSD type Unix-like system? So let's just kind of break this down. So Unix, for those of you who are uninitiated, is really an operating system built, I think, in the late 60s, that is modular, is extensible. So it's command line based, of course, and what it gives the user is text streams. So you can, let's say you echo a line of text, you can pipe that into another utility. So echoes a utility into, say, I don't know, awk, and you can print whatever part of the white space separated string. So if you have 3 words, you could pipe it into awk and print the third part of that string, for example, and then you could then maybe put it into tr and transform, say, a letter in that string or whatever character in that string and give it another. The point is, that is the idea behind Unix. It is modular, extensible, in a way simple tools. I'm not going to go into the whole history or the whole principles, but you can look all that up. Maybe I'll do that on a video in the future, and I'll demonstrate literally what I mean. But let's just scale this down to get to the point of this video. So what happened is that was made at Bell Laboratories, AT&T, who effectively owned that Unix-like product, okay? And you needed a license. Derivatives were made that needed a license. It wasn't free and open source as we understand today, and it certainly wasn't free software. So what happened is, in the 1980s, Richard Stallman, I think he was at MIT, wasn't happy with the situation, wanted a free software distribution, or a free software setup, let's say, based off Unix, okay? So he took the idea of Unix, they not reverse engineered, but they copied all the tools of Unix, all the system of Unix, let's say, and made it free software. So anybody could use it, nobody had to pay, but you had to effectively make it available, the source code. So, anybody who wants to know free software, look it up. I did a video kind of on why I don't use a free software distribution. Maybe that will help you. But again, we can do a video on that another time. This is just to get to the point. So it was closed down, proprietary, all this kind of stuff. Now it's open source. However, what they found was they did most of the tools. I think they had a problem with like the GCC compiler and all this kind of thing. But they basically did it. They didn't have a working kernel, or let's say production ready kernel. And then fortunately for them, after some years, as you probably know, Linus Torvalds at Helsinki University made a kernel, called it Linux, used the core utilities on top of that and other things, whatever. And that's where you get modern day Linux. Now, of course, Free Software Foundation like to make a point that it's GNU/Linux because of the GNU core utilities, all this kind of stuff. Who cares? But I know this is a big thing on the internet even today. People get very emotional about this. But I'm going to be ultra contrarian and say that neither of those are as important as Unix, okay? So what I mean by this is that, for example, let's start with the Linux kernel. So let's sort of draw back from the Unix side of things specifically. So the Linux kernel, I can, in theory, completely replace that, okay? I can use the BSD kernel. It's a kernel. It interacts with the hardware. It's going to start services and start user space and all this kind of stuff, okay? That is interchangeable to me. That I can compromise on it. If it technically doesn't run on my computer, boo-hoo. But I'm not running bleeding edge computers, as you know. I do not like modern computers, as you know, for various reasons. Watch previous videos on that. I like a ThinkPad, and BSD, whatever BSD does support legacy ThinkPads, and it will probably support most hardware. Now, so this, again, I'm talking on a more personal state here, but I think for most people, you're probably going to be okay if you're using another kernel. Okay, so what about the core utilities? Well, by definition, they're Unix. It's a Unix system, right? So all the core utilities, all these different things, or everything, but, you know, loading after the kernel or interacting with the kernel, all this stuff. Surely they're not interchangeable. Well, of course they are, because if you look at, for example, BSD, it has its own core utilities based off Unix. In fact, probably closer to Unix, closer to the philosophy of Unix, than even GNU core utilities, because of course GNU uses Bash as the default shell programming language or scripting language or command line interpreter or whatever. Bash is great. I use it in Linux, but if you notice, most of my, or all of my scripts are built in SH, the original Unix language, which means they are POSIX compliant, which means they will run on BSD. Now, if, again, we look at BSD, all of those core utilities have been written for BSD, from Unix to BSD. Therefore, I do not need GNU core utilities, and arguably some of these are built better by BSD. So, I can replace the GNU core utilities. So, for example, I could run OpenBSD, and it would not ultimately matter. Yes, I would have to have some issues with setting it up, with, you know, being compatible with different programs. Some programs, you know, have been built for Linux specifically, let's say, or the, you know, Linux operating system is not BSD compatible, I believe. I'm not exactly sure, but it's not going to be the end of the world. I would find replacements. And yes, there are going to be some commands that I use in Linux and the core utilities that aren't technically in BSD, but I would find a way around it. So the point is, for all those people getting so upset about what's more important, Linux or the GNU core utilities, neither are as important as Unix. Unix is where it started. Unix is the user environment I want to be in. It doesn't matter the kernel. It doesn't matter that they're the GNU core utilities. What matters is they're Unix utilities that I can use, and as long as I've got the kernel that runs with it and I can do what I need, as long as it's not atrocious. And, you know, BSD, OpenBSD particularly, has good reputation for security and whatever. I could perfectly survive and it wouldn't matter. So I just thought I'd throw this video out there because I know people get very emotional about this, and I thought I'd throw a bit of a curveball that neither of those matter. You can say GNU/Linux, whatever. I would say Unix/kernel, whatever the kernel is, as long as it was Unix-based, Unix-based/kernel. There you go, whatever. So, yeah, I just want to make that point. I'm sure I'll get loads of comments. No, I won't. But anyway, yeah, you tell me what you think about that, because it's interesting. I do have people who have come from BSD based operating systems who are now using Linux, and that should tell you something, that really it doesn't matter. You know, they've switched from BSD to Linux. It's not the point, but they're both Unix environments, right? And therefore they can do what they need. It doesn't matter. They could go back to BSD and vice versa. Important point here is it's Unix based, okay? I'm not trying to diminish, you know, GNU or Linux or Free Software Foundation and Linux. It's very good what it's done for the environment of free software, the environment of the world we live in computer-wise, but that's the point, is if I needed to, I could replace it and it wouldn't matter. Anyway, we'll leave it there. So you need to do the fake YouTube. You can like, comment, and subscribe. Now, I'm not going to edit this video because it's done on my phone. So I'm going to handcraft my special thanks, my Patreons who support the channel. So you look how privileged you guys are. So let's see if we can get this in. Oh, I don't know how this is going to show up. So it's going to show up back to front, reversed. Anyway, that's Sean. That's HTX80Nerd. And that's Sol. Thank you guys very much for supporting the channel. Hopefully I can see more of you supporting the channel. Look at the description, and you know, you can get some early access, handcrafted, your name written. Who knows? Depends if I do it on a phone. So thank you guys very much, and anyway, I'll see you in the next one.